So, if the order of human evolution was single cell organism, multi-cell organism, a fish, a lizard, a rodent, and so on and so forth, and all of these types of organisms still exist in some form to this day. So when we go outside, we can still see a fish, we can still see a lizard, we can still see a rodent. There's still single cell and small multi-cell organisms, right? So then that must mean that life itself is one single organism duplicating itself in such a way that it is simultaneously entering different stages of growth and development. So just as we were once a worm, that worm you saw earlier this morning will be something humanoid millions or billions of years from now. And I believe this is where we start to get into the concept of separation being an illusion. Because that would technically mean that there is no me, really. It's more so the cells that make up me are also essentially the cells that make up other living beings. They're just developing differently based upon what experience we have. So, so if all life started off as nothing more than a molecule, right? So we had nothing but various elements in a dark void, right? And then lightning strikes this void. Maybe I shouldn't say void. Maybe I should say a liquid, a fluid, water. If lightning strikes this water and now these elements become charged, so now they carry energy. Now they have a negative or positive charge, which means they can be attracted to each other, which means they can form molecules, right? And then all those molecules did was enter a barrier that allowed them to stay in that state of being versus having to constantly be interacted with. So, my bad. My throat is like hella. But yeah, so say, I don't fucking know, like you have a hydrogen molecule, right? Or whatever. It's kind of vulnerable because it can instantaneously interact with other elements, which can change its molecular structure. So it becomes something else, right? But if your molecules find a way or luck up and end up inside of a barrier that protects them from being interacted with, to the point where they can be stable, that's a cell. That's what a cell is. It's just a collection of elements and energy that has a barrier around it so that it's protected from being from its molecules being split up or whatever the fuck. I mean, not molecules, it's atoms being split up and essentially just dispersed. So it becomes a distinct thing that stays generally in that state of being and can create its own internal like system or way of functioning within inside of that barrier. So that's what a cell was. So eventually that cell figured out how to reproduce itself. It figured out some way to like take the energy and the the elements that are within inside of itself and duplicate it, which is wild. But I'm saying all this to say that is the building block that is all living things on the planet. So life is quite literally charged matter learning how to sustain itself longer and longer. Like, oh, just say if I was a matter, like just pretend I'm matter right now and I'm conscious, right? I'm like, oh shit, I'm a molecule. Oh shit, I got me a little barrier, I got me a little protection, you know? How can I extend this? Like, how can I make this keep going? And so it seems like the first thing was like, well, I'll just create another me. That way I can live forever because I'll just keep recreating myself, right? Just cloning myself. But then it realizes, okay, that's not quite good enough. Or this is where I don't know. Maybe it's like mutations kick in and it's like, oh shit, I'm not just cloning myself. Exactly. I'm creating things that are like me, but none of these things are exactly me. So I may kind of go on through them in some ways, but it's not exactly me. So that's when like the first like sense of like selfishness kind of kicked in. Or like the first sense of self-preservation. Like, oh shit, these other cells, are y'all following me? So now we're at the stage where the single cell organism is just learning how to multiply itself over and over as one single cell organism, right? But so then why does it become a multi-organism? And so it's mutations that create cells that are not exactly the same cell. So it started off as I'm just cloning myself. I'm literally a carbon copy of myself. But then a mutation happens. Something goes wrong, technically, in the cloning process to where I'm not just duplicating myself anymore. There's a little mistake. And that little mistake is what? A genetic variation. So now this thing is no longer just a clone of me. It's like me. It's very fucking close to me, but it's different. So whereas before, just knowing that my clone is okay or that my clone made it, then I made it because we're all me. But if you're telling me now that every time I reproduce myself, I'm slightly different, so I'm not me, doesn't that kind of increase like a sense of self, like an identity, a distinction from these other? So then at this point, this is where the first reproduction happens because two cells like accidentally collide with each other, like each other's barriers rupture for each other. And so they kind of fuse together, like all of their energy, all of their, like, you know, when Naruto does shadow clone jutsu and he splits up, but like they're all actually versions of himself. And we find out in one filler episode that they kind of have like personalities a little bit, but they split up. Y'all, my voice is fried. If you can't tell, I've been smoking a lot. So my voice is like, I'm sounding like Naruto, goddamn. But anyways, so Shadow Clone Jutsu, when the clones go do whatever the fuck, they fuck off in opposite directions. Even though they're experiencing individual experiences, when he releases the jutsu and they all come back into the original Naruto, he gains all of the information and experience. And also the wear and tear of those clones. So that's kind of what happened. So it's like we started off cloning ourselves, but then ourself started being a little different each time, having little mutations or quirks that's slightly different from the original, until at some point we clash with one of our clones and we fuse together. So the jutsu like disperses for a second and we're one again. But now I have something else. Like now there's differences inside of us. Now we're one organism that is half one organism and half the other organism. And so this was like the first like sense of sex. Like this was the first like you are you, I am me. We're now one, and everything that we were created something else, right? So from there, we just start doing that over and over and over again. But again, each time these mutations are so different and tweak this and cause that to the point where we end up, because now other clones are merging with each other. And now their experiences are syncing up. Their quirks are syncing up. And And so now we're starting to get the first like species. Essentially different variations of a cluster of molecules coming together and creating new variations over and over and over. And they're getting more and more complex. The mixing and matching and mutations are getting more and more complex until we're becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Because there's so many different ways that we can connect now. We had to be small before because there was only one way we could be. There was only one variation. There was no variation. That would be a better way to put it, is there was no variation because there was only one. So now that there's 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, now that there are different emanations of the one, there's more combinations that can be made up, and one being can now be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 all in one. Do you see what I'm saying? Like once we can only be one, then it was like, well, now there's 2, so we can be 1 and 2. But then 1 and 2 end up making 3. So now we can be 1 and 2 and 3, or we might just be 1 and 2, or we just might be 2 and 3. You see what I'm saying? So some organisms are less complicated than others. Some organisms are like, I'm just cool being 1 still. Some are like, well, I'm 1 and 2 now. And some are like, I want to be 2 and 3. And some are like, well, bitch, I'm the 1, the 2, the 3, 4, and the 5. Like, you see what I'm saying? So that being that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is going to be bigger and more complex and have more quirks and have more mutations than the being that is just 1 still. Is that making sense? So this is how we're getting the progression from single cell organism to multi-cell organism to massive like, you know how many cells we have in the human body compared to a single cell organism? You see what I'm saying? So there's tiny little organisms that have quite a bit of cells, and they're no bigger than like, a little tiny pebble or something. But then there's us, and we have billions, trillions of cells in our body. But what I'm trying to get at is either way, it doesn't matter. You're made of the same shit. You're still the same. We're technically still that same organism that was cloning itself. When we was just one molecule inside of one little membrane. We lucked up and we found a barrier. Or did God place a firmament around us? No, that's another conversation. But we'll just keep it simple and say that we looked up and found somehow a barrier, right? And that barrier protected our molecule. And then we just started cloning ourselves. So what I'm trying to say is we're still cloning ourselves. We never stop cloning. We're still that one, just cloning itself. But each time it clones itself, it fucks up a little bit in the most perfect way ever. And it creates a different version of itself. And this keeps going on and keeps going on until eventually we're like fish. We're straight up fish, different species of fish. Then you know, that doesn't work, and we take in breath. Or did God, blow breath into us? Whatever. We take in breath, we start breathing air, we're out of the water now, we're on land, or we're in the garden, whatever. From there, we're basically lizard-like creatures, or maybe we were a snake, whatever, right? And we're on land, and the same thing that we're doing in the water, which is mutating ever so slightly because we're reacting to our environment. So this is what may have been missing this whole time, is you may be thinking, okay, well, what determines what becomes one, or what becomes 1 and 2, or what becomes 3 and 4? Like what determines how these combinations come together and mutate, right? So I think this is where it might start getting into like the underlying principles of like epigenetics. But basically, when we were that clone, when we were that self, well, we still are, but when that's all we were, when we just started off as that clone, that original one cloning itself, we sent our clones out in all different directions, because that's just, we had no choice to do. When you're a single cell organism, once you duplicate yourself, that's it. You basically just release yourself out into the fucking, kind of like when you look at trees, and the trees that have the little helicopter things that fall off, or like when you take a fucking dandelion and you blow it, and the little things, the seeds fly out into the air. You think that dandelion is like, oh yeah, let me go get my seeds and see what my seeds is doing. No, that's it. It just releases it out into the fucking open. It clones itself into little seed packets, and then it just sends the seeds out. Or you send the seeds out by blowing on it. Either way, once those seeds are out there, they just out there, and they don't return back to sender. You see what I'm saying? So this is kind of what was happening when we were single cell organism. We would just duplicate ourselves, and then we would just fuck off until we got to the point of fusing back into each other. So why is this important? Taking it back to what I was saying about Naruto cloning himself, we were in that stage of sending the clones off, right? And when we was in that stage of sending the clones off, our clones started going through shit. So if I'm a single cell organism, I clone myself, and I'm blind, I can't see shit, I don't know what's going on, I'm just sending off another version of myself. That other version of myself, I don't know what direction it goes off in. It goes off just somewhere, right? And then, that cell may reproduce, and it sends off a clone of itself that just goes off somewhere, right? And the one that went left is going to have a slightly different experience than the one that went right. Because even if they are identical in DNA, or maybe just slightly off in DNA to where it don't really fucking matter all like that, the only true variation that's being experienced is the external environment, because one went left and one went right. So right is going through a different experience than what left is going through. So what does that mean? It means that when right clones itself, it's going to clone itself with the mutations and variations that were inflicted upon the journey on the right. Do you see what I'm saying? And then when left clones itself, it's going to clone itself with the variations and mutations based upon the experiences of the left path, right? And so this is where you start seeing like the true development of like phenotypes and different external, like different variations that really make one clone distinct from the other. And again, these things are very simple. These are very little tiny changes that you at this stage, you wouldn't even be able to see with the eye. But eventually, it starts becoming visible. The change starts to become visible until, well, some of us aren't worms anymore. Some of us are, like I said, we're fish now. Or some of us are fish and, you know, we end up developing into fish that can breathe above water for a short time. Essentially, this is how we start to drive forward and evolve into what would appear to be separate species. But this is what I'm trying to get you to understand. It's the illusion of separation in the sense of we're not actually a different species. We're still that same cell cloning itself. It's just one version of itself went and had one experience, and another version of itself went and had another experience. And those experiences molded the clone until it was no longer identical to the original one. But we're all currently in various stages of that. So that's what I'm saying. My personal theory is that that worm you saw earlier will likely be a humanoid being billions of years from now. Not saying literally that specific emanation of the one. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that species eventually should evolve into its own humanoid, or it just goes fucking extinct. And that is where our, what's the word that I'm looking for? That's where, like, we're cloning ourselves. We're essentially adapting through our mutations. But if we don't receive mutations that adapt adequately to the environment, right? Because this is all, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So everything that we're doing, when we move left, I'm getting a reaction for moving left. And then I'm reacting to whatever that reaction was. And I'm going to just keep reacting back and forth until something happens that snuffs out my ability to react. Because this is where death comes in. Like, I can't react anymore. You know? I can't take in information, and I can't respond to the information that I'm taking in. That's death. That's what death is. So that's what extinction is. But anyways, what I was trying to say was, we're sending out these clones of ourselves with slightly different variations, and then based off of the experience we have on those different paths, we tweak the variations a bit more and more in order to achieve the longest rate of survival. Because the goal is, now that we have that, remember I was talking about when we were a single cell and we were just cloning ourselves, there was no sense of self. We were just creating identical versions of ourselves. But once there becomes this realization that each version of myself is different and there'll never be another self exactly like me, there's a sense of self-preservation that kicks in. And now I'm trying to create the longest experience as I currently am. Like, I'm trying to create a longer experience, a longer and longer experience, in one vessel. We're trying to, basically, it seems like the goal is to figure out how long we can survive in one vessel, right? Because all of these mutations and adaptations are working to make the vessel that we're currently in last longer. So at first that looked like, you know, developing eyeballs so that we can see what the fuck we're doing, see what we're mating with, instead of just bumping. Because at first we're just bumping into our clones, right? Remember I was talking about our clones joining and then creating the 1 and 2 coming together to create a third. At first that was completely random because we're blind. All the clones are blind. We can't see each other. We don't know when we're going to bump into each other. We don't know what that other version of ourselves has been through. So we don't know what we're getting when we join with ourselves again. Does that make sense? So for all we know, that version of ourselves has gone off and gone through something terrible and is all mutated and fucked up or whatever. We wouldn't know until we join and become one with it. So at some point, or it may be a version of self that we're not really compatible to join with at all. Anyways, the point that I'm getting at is without vision, we can't really see or perceive. Without our senses, we can't choose. We're at the complete unfiltered mercy of our environment. Whatever happens to us happens, right? So one of the first what's the word I'm looking for? One of the first senses that we developed was sight, the ability to tell the difference in light. Because that's the thing, we didn't jump straight to being able to see in fucking 20/20 vision. We had to work our way up to 20/20 vision. At first, we were only able to tell the difference between, light and dark or variations in light. But eventually that evolves to what we have today, which is the modern eyeball, right? But that's still all eyeballs are. It's just an extremely perfected way of taking, let me not even say perfected, an extremely advanced and evolved way of taking in light and interpreting it. But so the brain came right after, like damn near simultaneously, vision and the ability to think and perceive what we're taking in. Because that's essentially what vision was. It was a way for us to finally be able to take in information before we merge with it. Because before, we couldn't take in any new information other than by merging with our clone. That was the only way we were able to take in new information, was merging with our clone. But by then, if there is anything off or amiss or isn't quite right, it's too fucking late for us to recognize that because we're already merged, right? So now when we have an eyeball and we have a brain, we have the ability to discern and be like, I'm not merging with you, right? So when you think about it, we've been rejecting each other or being attracted to each other for a very long time now. It's one of our most primal fucking instincts. When they say like, oh, you can't tell just based off of looking at somebody. We've been doing that shit for some long time now. For a long time now. But at any rate, what I was trying to get at is that where extinction comes in is if we don't manage to tweak our mutations in such a way to where we're able to survive the external elements in that same type of vessel. So it's like this clone that we are, it doesn't perceive itself as separate beings. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, if I'm a lizard, right? If I'm the emanation of self that is currently experiencing what it's like to be a lizard, right? This particular lizard that I am may die, but the lizard as a whole, there are other lizards. Therefore, I'm still alive as a lizard. You see what I'm saying? In general, even if this particular lizard vessel dies, the type of lizard that I am still exists. And so that self, that one that's inside of all of us, because it is us, because we only exist from one cloning itself, if that one is driving forward in the form of a lizard, it's going to try to perfect that lizard to the absolute T. Like, it's going to try and develop it as much as it possibly can to try to extend the lifespan or the overall life of that lizard. Because when what you do to the one, you do to all. What you do on a micro, as above, so below, you know how it goes. So if one of that lizard species extends its life expectancy, then all of the lizards of that species replicate whatever that one did, then the whole species as a whole will live longer on this earth. But if one of those lizards doesn't figure it out and the other ones don't have nothing to copy, then that lizard species is going to die off because it could not mutate in a way that was conducive enough for its current experience to be able to maintain that experience. So here we are as human beings, and it's a very real possibility that we too will reach a point where we no longer make the cut, the earth cut, you know? Like we stop mutating, we stop evolving, and we can no longer adapt to our environment in a way that sustains the human experience as a whole. Because you remember, even we increased our life expectancy. At one point, humans, the average lifespan for a human was like 30 years or some shit, right? Now we've got it up to 80. But what happens if we get to a point where it could go a couple ways? Like, we could go backwards until we are extinct. We could just make it to where 80 years isn't enough, you know, and that's a whole other thing. That's like when we're starting to get into like doing shit that wipes out human civilization within 80 years so that you can't outlive the death of the... That's what extinction is like when we as individuals can't outlive the death of the whole. So, like, if we were to set off an atomic bomb in every city on the earth or some shit, right? There's nothing I can do as a human, as an individual, to outlive my counterpart. So we will all die. We would be extinct. But even if we could get a couple humans to survive and then adapt, we should be able to keep us. Anyways, I'm rambling. I'm yapping at this point. Y'all get the point.